minutes. And I may have to come back and remind you again, but welcome. 2.5 minutes. Also, there are some seats in the front. There are some open seats in the front. So if you'd like, you can come forward.
I'm just wondering, is Tony Rydell here by chance? Where is he? Right there. Tony, would you be willing to come up and be one of our, not to put you on the spot or anything. Thank you. Casey, did you want to start?
Yeah, you're ready. You ready? Wait, hold on. I can turn the music up.
Could you take that mic off and test it? See.
All right. Good evening, Santa Rosa. How are we doing? Not bad. Not bad. Hey, make some noise if you've never been to Barrel Proof Lounge before. Well, congratulations. You found your entertainment destination. Listen, here's the deal. I spent like 12 years going all over Sonoma County and doing comedy shows and bars and restaurants and all kinds of weird spots. And then during the pandemic, we were like in parking lots and on roofs. And I think we did somebody's backyard one time. And then my buddy Rob Cervantes and I decided, what if we opened our own comedy club, right? So I quit like a 15-year career that was really good. It was a really good career. And then we opened our own place, and my parents could not be more proud. So I hope you guys enjoy my midlife crisis. Thank you so much for coming out and enjoying this place. All right, so we're here on a very special occasion, right? We're launching a book. Inflamed, Abandonment, Heroism, and Outrage in wine country's deadliest firestorm. I live in Bennett Valley. This is very near and dear to my heart, okay? This is written by two local journalists. First of all, Ann Belden, look at that. Is it a contest? I don't know. We'll see how this goes. She runs the journalism program at SRJC. Great school. My son went there. It was free. Thank you, Gavin. And previously spent 18 years as a reporter and editor on the San Francisco Peninsula. Not bad. But then also co-author Paul Gullixson, everybody. That's right. He's editorial director for the Press Democrat, which is our only source of news in Sonoma County for 20 years, and is currently the communications manager for the County of Sonoma. So please give a big hand for Ann and Paul, everybody. Let's go.
Hey, well, thank you very much. Now, I know you'll be disappointed if you did come here for a comedy act because you're not going to get one. But I am going to do something that comedians often do. I'm going to take a selfie so if you'll humor us for a second. Here, just everybody. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm a social media hound now, right? So, hey, we can't thank you enough for being here. Seriously, we are so honored to see all of you, and it means such a great deal to us that it wasn't that long ago we weren't quite sure this day would ever happen.
It's been a long 5 years. Very busy. We want to thank so many people, but we want to start with our families. I will start with my husband, Mason, and my kids. Wyatt is here in the front row. Asher is here somewhere. Oh, right there. For putting up with and supporting me through this never-ending project. I also want to honor my mom. Where are you, Mom? Oh, right there, second row. my mom has modeled strength and determination and persistence throughout her life, and that helped me greatly in getting this to the finish line.
Yeah, and I must excuse me. I really want to thank my wife Tamara, who's here tonight, along with my son Christopher. Yay! My daughter is not here. She has a pass. She's in midterms at the University of Oregon, making her dad proud. So she gets a pass. It's a good thing. But I just want to thank you all for your love, support, and most of all, patience over the last 5 years. I'm looking forward to vacationing with you soon. So, yeah.
We also want to thank much appreciation to Lauren Spates. She has a SRJC fan base in the back. She is our contributing author editor. She joined us during a critical time in late 2021, right in the middle of COVID, when Paul and I got lost in the trees, lost in the forest. She was always able to see the big picture, and she really helped get us across the finish line. So thank you, Lauren.
And we have a lot of people to thank tonight. We will throughout the program. So bear with us, because this is really first and foremost an opportunity to thank you. But we want to two things that we were hoping you come away with is a general sense of what the book is about, and meet some of the characters. If you're not familiar, if Inflamed is our best attempt at explaining what really happened up at Villa Capri and Varenna, and in the months that followed. Many of you know snippets of the story about how there were residents who were left behind in the wake of the fire that was approaching. And this ultimately is a story about key individuals who went up there to help, as well as some staff. We want to make that clear. And you're going to meet some of them today who did really remarkable things and put their lives at risk to save people. And we really want to honor them tonight. But the story also, it goes on from there. There's really three parts to the story. The first part is a background about Fountaingrove and some of the controversies and the history of wildfires that existed up there. And in the first part, you'll meet some of the essential figures in the book. Part two is really an hour-by-hour account of what happened the night of the fire. It's rather dramatic and emotional. It was emotional for us to write, and very emotional for us to as part of the interviews. And a part of that story is also the trials of family members who are trying to find out what happened to their loved ones up there and trying to make connections with them. And that some of those went on for days. And then the third part is really the long tail of what happened afterward, the many investigations that happened, the state investigations, some of the lawsuits, the local investigations, ultimately a criminal investigation. And we attempt to answer many of the questions really that some of the mysteries that inflamed our community, if you will. For example, why was no one able to find the keys to the shuttle buses outside Villa Capri that could have helped evacuate people? How was Oakmont Senior Living able to get backhoes up to clear the Villa Capri site just 1 week after the fire, when the burned neighborhoods, as you recall, were still barricaded, and there were National Guard troops preventing people from going in? And why were Villa Capri residents and their families told that they would be able to sift through the ashes for some of their belongings, but ultimately they were denied that opportunity? And then we also look into, why did the state back down? How and why did they back down from their early attempts to really come after the executive directors and the owners of Oakmont Senior Living, and how they were pressured to back down from their early penalties, but ultimately they did get Oakmont Senior Living to acknowledge that residents were abandoned and that they needed to make improvements up there. So we delve into a lot of these mysteries, and we think, as we say, this is an important story for the community as a whole. Oh, and then At last, we delve into the increasing frequency and intensity of these kinds of catastrophic events that are really happen across the country. And most often it's senior citizens who are left in harm's way. Vast majority of the victims in Maui fire, various hurricanes are often senior citizens. And we delve into this and we challenge that not only we need to rethink not only where we build retirement communities, but how we can better fortify them through with the resources, training, and planning to protect residents to make sure like something like this never happens again. So that's all part of this book, and it is part of a journey. But before we get into all that, let's back up, Anne. I want to ask you a question we often get asked: is how did this project begin, and what in the world were we thinking?
Still don't know that. I still don't know the answer to the second question, but I do know the answer to the first. Is Roberta McIntyre in the house? I saw you earlier.
Is she?
Yeah. Roberta got me into this. Roberta was doing a documentary on the fires, and she asked for my help during the summer of 2018 to help find people she could interview. And there was one story that had stuck in my head, and that was a story that Paul had written. Paul and I worked together 30 some years ago on the peninsula. And he had written this story about these two women who had raced up to Villa Capri, and it had just stuck with me. So I contacted one of those women, Melissa Langels, who unfortunately was supposed to be here tonight. And when Melissa told her story, we were all three in tears. Roberta filmed it. I conducted the interview. And afterwards, she showed me an Oakmont Senior Living. They had a new website out that explained their version of events. And they had a question that said, did family members evacuate all residents? And the website said there was a team effort led by staff with help from family members, which we greatly appreciated. And Melissa had just told me how she and Kathy had been locked out at one point, with 24 residents locked inside. And I read it aloud in front of Melissa, and she said, yeah, that's bullshit. And so I quickly realized that there was more to this story. So I called up Paul, who had left the Press Democrat, and somehow roped him into helping me with what we thought would be an article or two, maybe a series. And early on, we were able to acquire legal depositions in the case. And we report over like probably 6,000 documents. We reviewed hours of police body cam video and 911 calls. But most importantly, most importantly, we interviewed a lot of people, and one interview led to 100. And it's really been like trying to put together a 10,000 piece puzzle with an unknown number of pieces missing. But we had a lot of help along the way, and a lot of our sources are here tonight, and we really want to recognize and thank them for helping us piece it together. And we will share some of their stories in a little bit. But Paul, can you tell me how we went from a couple stories to a 464-page book?
Well, actually, my wife has been asking the same question, and it's an honest, fair question. But as you know, as journalists, you start gathering string on things, and as the story becomes more complex, more revealing, more emotional, more powerful. And as many of you know, this is not just a story about what happened that night. It's a story about a struggle for accountability and truth about what really happened that night. And there were pressures by certain individuals in the community that people were afraid of. They were afraid to tell the story about what happened. They're afraid of being sued. They're afraid of being denigrated or dismissed. And so in amidst all of that, in amidst the chaos of the coverage of the fires, we felt the whole story, even a good deal of the story, was not being told. And what kept us going was our deep admiration and appreciation for the people up up here and many of you who are in the audience who helped us tell the story. You are the heroes. This is your story, and we feel very honored to be as trusted with that, and to be we were motivated all along that we wanted to do your story justice. So really, you are the people that we wrote this story for. So please, a big round of applause for everybody who helped, many of you. So for many of these individuals, these are unsung heroes, some of whom you're going to meet for the first time. Some have not been covered. Some have been covered a little bit, but their full stories are not known. And so we want to, well, let's get to introducing our guests here. So let's sit down, and thank you, Gay. So first, let me introduce you to somebody who needs no introduction. My friend, former colleague at the Press Democrat, former columnist, and foremost historian of Sonoma County. Please, everybody, welcome Gay LeBaron. We're very honored to have you. Thank you. Thank you. Gay, let's start. At the start of the book, we talk about the history of Fountaingrove, and I just want to ask you a couple of questions. Mainly, there's a background of the fire that longtimers remember as the Hanley Fire. What can you tell us about some of the similarities between the Hanley Fire and the Tubbs Fire? What we learned from that?
I think it's the same path. Only the difference was that there wasn't the fuel that in the Hanley Fire, and it could be stopped, and it was stopped, and didn't do anywhere near damage, just not even close to what the Tubbs Fire did.
And what was up at Fountaingrove at that time?
Nothing. Some polo ponies, a couple of pretty good sized houses, and open land.
Yeah. So it was just a bunch of ranch, and so it was really open space. And then it came really close to burning down the hospital at that time, right?
It did indeed. A man named Mike Turnick, who was a fire marshal, happened to have learned to run a bulldozer when he was a young man working in the woods, and he got on a bulldozer and made a fire trail, and the wind died. Everything happened in good time, but the fire didn't go west. Because there wasn't any fuel to take it west, and that's the difference. The round barn stood, and Coffee Park stood.
Yeah, and so did Journey's End, and
so did Journey's End, and everything else that went this time, and a lot of places along Mark West that weren't there in '64. Yeah. I had a call that night. I was at home, and I got a call from somebody who lived on Porter Creek Road probably about 8 o'clock at night. And we knew there was a fire in Calistoga in that area. And his name was Garfield. And he was somebody that I didn't really know, but he called me at the paper, and he had my home phone number. And he called and said, the fire just went by my house going about 40 miles an hour, and it's on its way to Santa Rosa. And I said, what have you been drinking? And because it just didn't seem likely. And then I walked out front and looked, and you could see it coming over the hill. And my husband was a photographer for the Press Democrat then, and he was teaching at night at the junior college in those days. And he came home, changed his clothes, and he was gone, and I didn't see him for 2 days.
Well, that sounds like a conversation that Kent Porter had with Ted Apple that same night, saying that fire is coming fast. That it was windswept back then too. The winds were really intense.
Same winds, but not the fuel.
Yeah. Well, back then, as I recall, the fire spread in the Hanley Fire. It took 4 days to go the distance. It took 4 hours in the Tubbs Fire. So it was much more intense. One more question. What do you recall about that when they built Fountaingrove Parkway? There was a lot of controversy about that construction. There's some old timers here. Were there worries about fires as part of that?
Oh, yes, indeed, and there was worries about lots of things. And the Parkway and putting that many homes, 60 by 100 lots in an open area that had been burned over not that long before.
Yeah. Well, and there was also a promise you'd never be able to see it from the lower levels, and as it turned out, we could. Okay. Okay, we could talk forever, but thank you so much for being here. We may have more questions for you. Anne?
Yes. Testing.
You got enough?
I have the great privilege.
Is it working?
Is it working?
You got announcing.
Yeah, we need.
Yeah, try this one. See.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, I have the great privilege of introducing Susie Pritchett. Are you able, can you stand? Okay. Susie was at Villa Capri the night of the fire. And we wanted, and I thank you for being here. I interviewed Susie a couple years ago, and she was so gracious in sharing her story. And these stories are very traumatic. I wanted to ask you, did you feel before the fire or during the fire that Villa Capri was prepared for a fire like this?
I just didn't feel that they were really prepared as they should have been. We should have had some fire drills and a little more instruction about what would happen if we had to evacuate.
Okay, so there was none of that.
Not really, no. They did let us know to be sure and have our robes and slippers handy.
Okay, but that's it.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And is there anything about that night that you want to share?
Well, just the camaraderie of all the folks involved, and everyone trying to help each other.
Yeah.
It was wonderful, really.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do this the less graceful way. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Susie. I am just, I can't tell you how much help the two individuals sitting down here gave, not only that night, but to us in working on the book. I'd like to introduce Kathy and Mark Allen. Mark and Kathy arrived at Villa Capri shortly after 2 a.m. They went to get Mark's mom, Helen Allen, and they stayed to help evacuate the building. And Kathy was there until the very end. I don't want to give away too much of the story if you haven't read it, but she made sure that every last resident was taken care of. Mark and I have probably exchanged, I think it was like 75 emails, so many interviews. I remember putting email after email. Okay, really, one last question. It was finally no more questions except these. Kathy, at what point were you most concerned about your safety and the safety of everyone else?
Is this working? Oh,
Yeah, there we go.
I do have a PE teacher's voice, so I thought I'd be okay.
Just hold it up. Hold it up.
Hold it up close. Okay. There was a point where we were loading the Villa Capri little shuttle van, seats 18, I think. And Joey and I were pushing people into the van as fast as we could. And I looked to my right was the east side of the building, and flames were just flying up like crazy. That was the most scariest part, I think, of the whole night, was seeing all those flames and knowing that we had more people to get in those vans.
And Mark, I'd like to ask you the same question. What was the scariest moment where you thought, oh my gosh, I might not get out of this?
No, I always had an escape plan. No, but when I came around the building, I'd taken my mom down from the second floor and down the stairs and then out the exit. There was no lights on, just a burning bush or two. And it was a lot of wind and smelly and not much light. But when I came around the front of the building, all the vineyard alongside the hill of Fountaingrove Road went up in an instant. And the only thing I can give you an idea what it kind of seemed like is like when you turn on the gas of your barbecue and you don't light it real soon. It doesn't last very long, but it scares the crap out of you. So that's when it really got real. It's like, oh yeah, because up at that point, it was like being at a campfire because there was smoke and wind, but we were inside, and inside you were fine. But when I stepped outside and that whole hillside just erupted one boom, then it was like, oh, I guess I better get going.
And Kathy, you and Mark, and especially you could have taken Mark's mom, Helen Allen, and you two could have just driven away and said, hey, we're going to go get help. But you stayed. Why?
I think that's what most people would stay and help get everybody out. There were too many people there that weren't able to walk. One lady that was blind, and impossible to walk away from that. I just wouldn't feel good about that at all.
Okay. Thank you very much for everything you did. Now you're up.
You know, you say that anybody would have done that. That's not always the case. And the fact that you were willing to stay and put yourself at risk, even when you knew that it was a life-threatening situation, I mean, that is a remarkable thing. And that's really what inspires us about this story. Because anyway, I now want to introduce you to somebody. While this was going on down in Villa Capri, while Villa Capri was actually burning, and Kathy and Melissa were there. Mark was shuttling people away, and meanwhile, up in Varenna, we had, I'd like you to introduce you to RJ Kissling, and RJ is a remarkable individual, a welder from who was woken by his sister, Stephanie, and was encouraged to go check on their grandfather. And RJ, you were a little skeptical. You thought it had been cleared out. You were pretty confident that certainly the place would have been evacuated by then, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, we were convinced, and it was her persistence that kind of egged me on to just go up there. And realistically, I only went up there just to appease her. In fact, I got dressed in my work clothes. I was going to just show up, see that it was all good, and go to work.
And so you drove up there right around where Home Depot is on Centennial Drive, right around there. You hit a barricade. And you asked the officer there at the barricade something. Could you tell us what you encountered there?
Well, I have to admit that I actually have spent 6 years trying to forget that night.
Oh.
But yeah, there was a barricade there. I told him that I was interested in Villa Capri and the retirement facility. And he said that he had thought that they had been evacuated. And so I kind of accepted that and turned around and walked away. And it just wasn't settled with me. And I think that it was evacuated, just wasn't good enough. So I persisted to find another way up there.
And RJ is somebody who's, if nothing, is persistent. And so he went ahead and drove around the barricade and drove up there, and they were burning branches, and it was a very difficult drive. And Stephanie was your sister was on the phone with you all during that drive, correct?
Yeah, she was kind of coaching me on directions to get up there. I'm not super familiar with Santa Rosa, and so she was kind of directing me, and it was over shrubs, burning branches, and up curbs and over medians, and to describe it was just, everything was on fire. The wind was
horrendous. It was a hellacious scene. And then you finally got to Varenna through the smoke. The front is dark. You're convinced at that point, yes, that it had already been evacuated, but Stephanie encouraged you to go ahead and go in and check, make sure, right?
Yeah, so I drove up. As I entered the driveway, every tree was on fire. All the bushes were on fire. The standing buildings at that time were not on fire. And I remember taking a mental note as I went by via Capri, and I've relived that snapshot of my brain thousands of times. And I apologize for not helping. But yeah, so.
Well, RJ, you were really, you were a true hero. And he walks into the lobby, and the lobby is full of seniors. And as you'll read in the prologue, one of the gentlemen stands up and says, are you the firefighters? Are you here to help us? And the remarkable thing about RJ is he did not leave. The remarkable thing about all these people is they stayed with the people to save lives. And at one point, he was the only one up there. There were a couple of staff members who'd soon disappeared. And his wife, Betty, who's here with us tonight, we actually have traced it that she was, because she knew her husband was up there, she called 911, and it was because of her call that we firefighters were able to get up there. And it's our conviction that, and talking to the firefighters who did arrive and put out the fires around Varenna, that Varenna would have burned too, were it not for RJ and his wife. So a round of applause for. Forgive me. These are emotional stories in here. Even 5 years later, I get choked up myself about that. Well, next I'd like to introduce Andre. Andre is one of the staff members at Varenna. Andre was also one of the people there who was helping to clear buildings, clear rooms, getting people out. He and Michael, who's here with us, they were very instrumental in trying to get residents to come down to the lobby while the executive director was trying to get them to go back to their rooms. It was a very difficult, challenging time as they went through this. At one point, Andre goes to the south building and tries to clear out the rooms there. He encounters, he finds his woman on the top floor, Elle Burton, who's wheelchair bound, and he has nobody to help him. And Andre, I'm just wondering what you were thinking as you were trying to get Adele down from that top. So there was no elevator operating at that time or anything?
Excuse me. No, it wasn't an elevator working. What was going through my mind was we got to get out of here. It was a kind of a strange night that night. I remember knocking on her door saying, we need to evacuate, and no one answered the door. So I walked away, and there was another couple that was knocking on 300 at the same time I was knocking on 301, which is her door. And no one came to 300, so we started walking out, and something inside of me told me to go back to 301. And when I knocked on 301, I heard this comment, and excuse my language, but the first thing that came to my mind when I heard that voice was, oh, fuck, because I didn't know what to get. And there's a little story behind this lady, too. I'll tell you later. When she came to the door, I told her, I said, ma'am, we have to evacuate. There's a fire. And she said she had to get her things together, so I knew I was going to need help with her because there was no power in the building. I went into the Varenna building from the south building, and I didn't find anyone. So I went back into the building, went to the third floor, and I went to the storage closet, and I found a wheelchair. I put her in the wheelchair, and I pushed it to the south end of the building, the stairway. I had her dog, Abigail, who was blind, in her lap.
Blind German Shepherd.
And the medication. And so what I did was, when I got to the stairway, I think my adrenaline was going, and I think she actually kept me calm, because I can remember saying, okay, I'm going to lift you up, and we're going to go step by step down the steps. And she goes, She just says, So I locked the wheelchair down, and I went out the building, and I went back into the Varenna building the second time. And as I went out, there was a staff member of mine that was there, and they were staging people to be evacuated. And I said to her, could you come with me to the third floor to evacuate this lady to the second floor so we can evacuate? And she looked at me and she said, save yourself, and ran off. They had some faculty and staff there that was waiting to be evacuated, and they looking at her run off, and they looking at me, and I'm looking at her. And I just said, excuse my language, I dropped the F-bomb and said, Lord, give me the strength. And I just proceeded back on to help her out. And it was the grace of God that me and her, we survived that night. You know, without him, we would never made it.
Andre, like the others, Andre did not leave. He stayed with her. Her name is Del Burton. She's a wonderful story. And I encourage you, in the book, you'll read about their harrowing tale of trying to get off. He's convinced at this point that everybody was gone, and he actually starts to wheel her down the driveway to get her out of the smoke. And it's a rather harrowing tale, but he did a wonderful job. You have to read the story, but he is truly one of our heroes as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to, yes. I now want to introduce Captain Tony Riddell, who was he was one of the first firefighters to arrive up on the hill after there was an initial call that said, we still have seniors. And there was a little bit of a confusion. Ann and I went through the transcript, 911 transcripts, and there was a lot of confusion about, well, whether help was needed at Villa Capri or Varenna or both. And Captain Riddell was able to get up there with his crew, and they were able to set up a perimeter and start knocking down some of the fires that were threatening Varenna. Captain Riddell, you want to talk about that a little bit? What were your thoughts when you first got up there?
Well, you have to remember, I'd been through hell and back 4 or 5 times before I even arrived on scene.
Exactly.
I was not expecting so many people to be up there.
Yeah.
We immediately got put on structure protection and establishing a perimeter around the facility. Luckily, we were able to put out, I think, 2 structures on the, it's been 6 years, 2 structures on the west side, and then a garage fire just south of the main building there. One thing I do remember is driving up, the heat from the assisted care facility as you enter.
From Villa Capri burning, the intensity of the heat.
Well, there were explosions and heat as we drove up. I didn't know what to expect as I got up the hill.
Yeah.
I thought there was, as I saw signage coming in, it's like, oh boy, this is a large facility.
Yeah.
How many people do we have up here still? Sorry about that.
Yeah, and so it was because of the intensity of that heat from that fire that was actually spreading the fires up the hill, and there were also embers, spot fires all around Varenna at that time. Like you said, some of the structure fires were starting, and you were trying to stop those before they got out of control.
Luckily, we had a couple crews that were on foot. Walking perimeters with hand tools as they pulled our Type 1 in. And we still had water there.
Yeah.
Hydrants were still flush with water. We were able to put the structures out. If we weren't there to do that, that would have crept up through the solo condos that are on the west side all the way up to where I would estimate at least 100 people were waiting to be evacuated.
Yeah. And in the book, we go into detail as to the amount of time you needed to help control those spot fires to allow time to get the buses up there. Buses were clearing out Kaiser
Buses
Hospital.
couldn't leave.
They couldn't even get up there. Yeah.
Well, they couldn't leave.
Yeah.
Once we did get them loaded, they couldn't leave until the fire dispersed.
Because the intensity of the fire.
The intensity of the heat on the entry.
Yeah. So you were buying time so you could load the buses.
Yeah.
Remarkable work. A round of applause for Captain Rydell and his crew.
I don't want to forget the other 3 people that were on board that engine with me as well. Tony Albright, Carolyn Upton, and I don't know if I should say his name if
Tony
he doesn't want me to.
Or Mike Stornetta.
Oh, no, you should be okay. So, yeah, Carolyn Upton, Tony Albright, are they here? Any of them here
I
tonight?
don't think they're here.
They couldn't come tonight. Yeah,
There
we
was another firefighter on board with us as well.
Mike Stornetta?
No.
Oh, on your crew.
My engine.
Yeah.
Mike Stornetta was Sonoma County, or Santa Rosa. Jesse Fagoni.
Yeah, Jesse. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for stepping in. We want to take a moment to talk to the daughters of Villa Capri residents, 2 daughters. In part 2, you'll read about how Dawn Ross searched desperately for her missing parents, Bill and Wanda Lee, while also dealing with having just fled from her own home, which burned down. Dawn, you tried to get to Villa Capri that night, but you were told at a checkpoint that everyone was off the hill. What was going through your mind, having just lost your house, as you searched for your parents all night and all morning?
Yeah, like somebody else, I've been trying to forget about this for 6 years. So we lived off Reebley Road, and when we fled our neighborhood, we were sitting in the Oliver's parking lot there, and I said, do you think we should go check on Mom and Dad who were both at Villa Capri? They both had dementia, so they were in the dementia care portion of the facility, which is locked, which means they can't get out, but people can get in. And so we decided, out of abundance of caution, let's just go by and check on them. As you guys remember from that night, like, it was hard to even believe that the fire could jump from where it was to, burn down all of Fountaingrove. But we saw our first law enforcement of the night at the bottom of Fountaingrove when we started going up from Oliver's. And he told us that we told him that we wanted to go check on my parents, and he said everyone from the senior facilities up there had been evacuated to Findlay. And we believed him. Thank goodness these guys didn't. So we spent the next hour going to Findlay, searching there. There were a billion people there. And from there, we went to a friend's house, and we kind of started a command center looking for my parents. Well, I'll keep going. So I kept calling Villa Capri, and Villa Capri, the parent company, which is in Southern California, and emailing, and like every way I had of communicating, and that all my friends had of communicating. We were like inundating them. And this is, 3 in the morning now, 2:30 in the morning. We finally heard from the executive director of Villa Capri at about noon that day. She finally responded to one of my emails and said that my parents were at New Vintage Church. And we didn't know for a long time that all of the rest of this had happened. We assumed they had just been orderly evacuated. And we went to New Vintage Church and we found them there. They were in their pajamas and, no glasses and no medication. And my dad kept saying, everything was on fire. It was all on fire. The building was on fire. The street was on fire. So by the time they'd been evacuated, it had obviously, fire was everywhere. And so after spending an hour or so with them and kind of calming them down, by now we had known that our house had burned down. And so I said, I asked what was going to happen. Do you want me to be saying all this? How much do you want me to go into here?
Save it for the...
Yeah.
Well, why don't you just go ahead and say,
Okay.
so you went over to Target to get some things, and then what happened when you came back to New Vintage Church?
Yeah, so my family, we were all in our jammies too. And so I said, you know what, we're going to go on a Target run. We're going to go get some clothes for all of us and some blankets and pillows, and we'll be back in a couple of hours. They told us that it was everyone would still be there. And we got back and it was a ghost town.
There was no forwarding message.
No, it was all empty. It turned out it had also been evacuated because the fire, as you remember, was still roaring for days. And so the church had been evacuated, but no notes, no nothing. We finally found a guy. We still don't know if he was a janitor or a homeless guy or who he was. But we saw a guy and we're like, where did everyone go? And he said, I heard something about Concord or Albany, and we were like, what?
And you got to read.
We lost him again.
And finally, we'd like to introduce Beth. Beth Steffi has been one of our protagonists in part 3. Beth's mom lived at Villa Capri. And Beth assumed that Oakmont Senior Living had smoothly taken her mother off the hill that night. Alice. So Beth has not backed down from seeking truth and accountability and long-term legislative change to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. Beth, at what point did you realize that maybe everything didn't go as smoothly as you had assumed?
Pretty much right off the bat. We were lucky, unlike what Dawn went through. My mother remembered my sister's cell phone number, and a Red Cross volunteer at the vet center called my sister, and my sister was able to go pluck her out of the church before this Albany and wherever the heck they ended up happened. So the next day I was sitting with my mom, and I said, tell me what happened. And I assumed it was orderly. She said, well, Helen Allen's son woke me up. And I'm like, what? That doesn't make sense. Helen Allen's son woke you up. So I kept on digging and asking. It turns out that's Kathy's mother-in-law. Her son, Mark, who was just there, he woke everyone up. They had a very organized plan when Kathy and Mark were at Villa Capri. He woke them up, got them out to the hallway, and then Kathy would help them get down the stairs. My mom hadn't taken stairs in 10 years. She didn't walk. She had a walker. So anyway, I kept asking questions, and the more I found out, I thought, this can't have actually been the way this went down. So here we are 6 years later. And my goals have been pretty focused the last 6 years. One is accountability for the people who own the company. And I'm not talking about the employees, but the managers and the ownership of that company. They need to be held accountable. And then the other, yes, thank you. And also when you look at accountability, yeah, it's not only were they not accountable and they haven't been held accountable because there was a civil case and there was a state case and then there was a DA's case and everything kept settling. And I wanted some of these cases to go through, maybe even have a jury trial so you all could find out what happened 6 years ago, 5 years ago. It never happened. So the last time they settled, I was so angry. And I just set out on on a crusade to get the story told. And then enter Anne. I found out through Melissa, who's not here tonight, that Anne was interested in writing the story, and I reached out to her immediately, and I'm here to help in any way. So I'm so glad the story's being told, because not only is there accountability, that's really important, the other is acknowledgement for the people you just heard right here. Many of us didn't know about what these folks did, and that's not okay. And Oakmont Senior Living vilified Kathy and Mark and the other people at Villa Capri who've risked their lives to save everyone. They vilified them. So the truth needs to come out. These guys need to be acknowledged. They're going through PTSD. It's been a horrible thing they've been through. And then the last thing I'm really focused on is, obviously we cannot rely on the integrity of the people who own these facilities to do the right thing and put safety over profit. So we need legislation that's passed that will keep them from making decisions that are going to put people in harm's way. So that's been my quest the last 6 years, and I'm not giving up.
So thank you all. We really appreciate it. We know it's difficult to relive these stories. It's been difficult to relive and put all these pieces together. But before we there's a few more people we want to acknowledge, and we'll have time to take some questions. But first, we want to just recognize a couple of people in particular. Thank you. We wish we could give you all a Congressional Medal of Honor for what you did, but we want to particularly recognize Kathy, who was at the forefront, and the two people who spent the most time with us in telling the story, and that would be Kathy and Beth. And Beth has been such a protagonist in this story and moving this forward. And yeah, Beth, those flowers were for you. She already arranged them. She didn't know they were for her. Anyway, that's who Beth is, right? She's always a step ahead of me. So.
So one thing that I think is really important is that the heroes on this stage have not sought the limelight. They are so humble, and they have not been awarded by any city or entity. So if we could just give them a hand right now, that would be good. In addition to the people up here, there are so many more that played a pivotal role in Inflamed, many of whom were also heroic, terrified, traumatized that night, and then plagued with guilt, fear, regrets, flashbacks in the days and months that followed. If you could just please hold your applause while we name a few people. Elizabeth Bruno, could you please stand? Elizabeth is a longtime former employee of Villa Capri, who shed light on circumstances that may have created a situation, a situation ripe for disaster. And Elizabeth was someone we interviewed early on who was really pivotal in helping us figure out what led to these conditions. So thank you. Gina Jacob. Gina had to flee from her own home, and she raced to Villa Capri to get her father, Arlen. And on her way, she was the one who alerted Oakmont Senior Living executive staff about the fire. And then she also informed the caregivers who were at Villa Capri that there was a fire close, because they were cut off from cell phone service. The power had been going on and off. So Gina really helped spread the word about the fire that night. Susie, we've already recognized. I was hopeful that another resident, Nell Magnuson, she was also unable to make it. Here in the front row, I want to introduce Cynthia and Annette. Stand up. Cynthia was 21 and working as a caregiver at Villa Capri. Annette was 23 and 8.5 months pregnant. They both endured such harrowing journeys to safety, and they brought residents with them. Cynthia drove 3 residents through a firestorm to safety. Annette left on a shuttle with 8 residents and kept them safe in a random county building parking lot, while all the time worrying about the safety of her unborn child, who was born like 3 weeks later. They too were abandoned by managers, executive directors, and the corporation. And I want to thank them personally. So many times I texted, if this were nonfiction or if this were fiction, I could just make things up, but I had to text them over and over. How were you wearing your hair? What kind of jewelry were you wearing? I'm sure they were sick of all the texts and phone calls, and I really appreciate you guys bravely sharing your stories. Janice Laskowski, friend of Villa Capri, a friend of several Villa Capri residents who had a near-death fire experience about a mile from Villa Capri, and then coincidentally ends up in the emergency room with a resident from Varenna. So you'll have to read about Janice's story. And you have to connect with Lauren. Is Gary here? Gary Basile? Bus driver? Okay. Gary was supposed to be here. He drove, helped get a bus through a perilous journey up there while wearing pajamas and worried about his own home. And then I want to also recognize Catherine Stebner, the elder rights attorney. Thank you, Catherine, who took on the case for the residents and their families. And then I really want to thank the families and recognize the families of Ruth Callan. The families of Ruth Callan, Viola Sodini, Len Colwick, Henrietta Hillman, and Bess Boudreau. Some of these family members spent hours searching like Dawn did for their loved ones. Vivian Flowers, who's here, she spent 3 hours unloading buses at Finley Community Center looking for her mother because she was told that that's where everyone was. Ruthie and her siblings, Ruthie Krupinski and her siblings spent hours searching shelters for their mother, Ruth. And Sherry and Sarah Minson, when they finally found Bess Boudreau, their mother/grandmother, she was in a hospital where she had been registered as a Jane Doe. So I just want to thank you for all of your help and recognize what you guys went through. Paul?
And as you're hearing from these stories, not everybody made it out okay. There's a lot of trauma, a lot of physical damage that occurred, and the book goes into detail. And one of the claims by Oakmont Senior Living was everybody got out okay, everybody was fine. Well, that was not the case. They were not fine. And there are still people today who deal with the trauma of the botched evacuations, if you will. But in particular, I just wanted to give a shout out to Michael, who's here, Andre's friend and colleague, who was very instrumental in clearing rooms when getting people out of the rooms at Varenna when he was told by their manager not to, but he did it anyway. He and Andre. Carol Williams, is Carol here tonight? Thank you Carol's one of the residents who shared her stories with us and was a key contributor for us. Chris DeMott, are you here, Chris? Chris is and Mika. There are two Varenna employees who weren't on duty that night, but heard about what was happening and drove around the barricades to drive up to help. And so when we hear about the executive director who said she couldn't make it up there, and there's still a big 6-hour gap about where she was. It's stories like this that we find particularly remarkable. So we want to thank Chris and Mika for their help. Officer Orlando Macias, officer, thank you. Officer Macias, he was there at Varenna. He was actually breaking down doors ultimately to check rooms, and did some remarkable things that night. We are so thankful and appreciative of you being here and sharing your stories with us. And the family of Sally Tilbury, are you here? Thank you. Sally is a woman who slept through the craziness of the evacuations that night and woke up in Varenna to find everybody gone. And she's a remarkable woman who when she looked at Varenna, and when she looked at the surroundings outside and the burned environment, she was convinced that North Korea had dropped the bomb, and because that was the big tension at the time. And we also want to recognize posthumously people like Bob Minton, Frank Perez, key residents of Varenna, who shared their stories with us and spent a lot of time with us and have now since passed on, and their families will tell you it was some of the injuries they sustained that were part of that. So.
A few others that we want to thank, Donald Laird for the drone photos. I don't know if Donald is here. Roberta McIntyre for filming the reunion. Mark Fernquist for help with depositions. Jeremy Hay, Ted Apple, Nick and Brian in the back who've been here setting up the AV and making it work. And my students, Mike and Hannah, who are taking photos, and Peter and Sean. I have the best students. We also want to thank our agent Jill Marr and Permuted Press for publishing the book. And I think we're going to take any questions.
Yeah, our program's gone a little longer than we expected, but we do have a minute. Does anybody have any questions for our panelists or any thoughts? Yes.
Who was the person that went up to Varenna in the van, and you were an employee of Varenna? And my daughter had to call him on her cell phone and say, find my mother. It was about 6 hours.
Who was the Varenna employee who went up the next morning in a van to find, and then found Sally Tilbury and others?
And they were told is that they didn't care about the residents. It was sort of like, you find your mother on your own, but we're sending that van up to get all the medical records out of the office. So the task of that van driver was only to get the medical records.
They wanted to get the med list. So
yes.
Had their meds.
Yeah. But there were 3 people in that South building. When they got
Right.
that truck, she got in that van with that fellow. I want to thank that fellow, whoever he is, for rescuing my mom.
Yeah, well, it is in the end of part 2 of the book. It's Tony. It was Tony, right? Tony Ruiz. It was Tony. Yeah, Tony Ruiz. Yeah.
I don't know if Tony is here.
I don't think so. I don't think Tony's here. But
any other questions? Yes, Donna.
Not really a question. I just want to thank all. Other people was like this. You make the best oatmeal now.
Donna, thank you for saying that, because that's our feeling. We've been holding on to this story for a long time, and that's why we wanted to be here today to recognize them.
A long time off.
Yes.
Thank you so much for.
Well, this is a community story, and this was your story. So thank you for helping us tell this. Yeah.
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you to all the staff that supported that night and everything that we went through. It was a hardship that we'll never forget for the rest of our lives. And to all of you up here that stood and told your stories, I appreciate you and I respect you with all honors from the heart. I want you to know that, because what's going on tonight is a big realization of what is happening in our nation today with our elderly, and that we need to take care of them and pay forward attention to make sure that they get what they need when they need it.
Well said, Michael. I know how much you've been through, and that means a lot. So thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions or thoughts? We just really want to thank you all again for being here. We have a few things that we want to we will be signing a few books afterward if anybody would like that. And we have a few other things. Why don't you?
Yeah, you want me?
Yeah, why don't you do the first two and I'll do
Yeah. So you can follow our journey with Inflamed on Facebook at facebook.com/inflamed the book, one word. We're also on Instagram. You have to hold that. If you have a moment or feel inclined, we would appreciate a kind word, a good comment on Amazon, Goodreads, social media. We're really trying to get the word out about this book, and it starts here. So anything you guys can do to help, that would be great.
Yeah, if you think it's a good doorstop, say something nice. The good fly swatter, just say it's real good, and leave it at that. We also want you to know that if you're interested, we do have some readings coming up. We'll be at Copperfield's Books tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. We'll be at Reader's Books in Sonoma on Wednesday, November 8th at 6 p.m. And we'll also be at Book Passage in Corte Madera on January 7th at 2 p.m. And we also have a number of speaking events coming up, including at Oakmont Symposium on November 19th. And then actually Corix is holding a special event where we're going to be December 2nd. We'll be doing there too. So Copperfield's in Santa Rosa at Montgomery Village. That's tomorrow night at 7. They do want at 7, and they are asking people to sign up for that. We have about 80 people signed up for that. Yeah. So that's very exciting. So
I want everybody to give them and Paul a round of applause to make a conclusion for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Donna?
Thank you for helping us heal. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear you in this book.
Yeah.
To heal. And I wasn't up there. I was in my own place trying to get away from the fire.
Yeah.
Which I was, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But sharing all this and hearing your stories is helping me.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And that's really our hope, is that there would be some closure and healing, that we could move on from this and learn from this, and make sure that those lessons are learned, and that we can do better. We can do better. So with that, thank you all so much for being here. One last applause for all of you and all of our heroes in the crowd. Thank you.